LEGO Star Wars is over 25 years old now, which means you probably missed things like minifigures with light-up lightsabers, the first minifigure with a two-color leg mold, the fact that only 3 minifigures were made with rubber heads, and way more. So today, we're going over 25 updates that you probably missed in LEGO Star Wars. Starting with the most hated character in Star Wars, accidentally revolutionizing the way LEGO makes minifigures. In 1999, Jar Jar Binks became the first LEGO minifigure in history to have a custom sculpted head. Before him, every single minifigure for over 20 years used the same headpiece. But Jar Jar's weird head obviously couldn't fit the standard mold, so LEGO had to make a totally new one just for him. And that single decision unlocked the door to everything that came after. Custom molded heads for Yoda, Chewbacca, other Wookiees, aliens, droids, and every other theme. All of it traces back to Jar Jar, but he wasn't the only Phantom Menace character who changed LEGO forever. From 1978 to 1999, every male LEGO minifigure had the same hairpiece. But when Qui-Gon Jinn showed up in the 1999 Phantom Menace sets, LEGO designed a totally new hairpiece just for him. It was the first new male hair mold in 2 decades. And just like Jar Jar's head, that single piece opened the door to every new hairpiece that came after it. But here's something crazy. LEGO Star Wars almost never happened at all. In 1997 and 1998, LEGO's own leadership nearly killed the Star Wars deal before it even started. The company had a long-standing policy against war toys, and several executives were super against licensing something literally called Star Wars. They were specifically worried about German mothers because market research showed that they were really worried about violence in kids' toys. The team pitching the deal had to strategically reframe Star Wars as a fantasy battle between good and evil, instead of a space war story. But even with that framing, some execs still said no. It was so close to not happening that Kjeld Kurt Christensen himself had to personally greenlight it and push it through. The deal was finally signed in 1998 after 6 weeks of negotiations, and it was LEGO's first ever licensing agreement. And even after it got approved, the original 1998 licensing agreement between LEGO and Lucasfilm was only set to run until 2008 or 2009. When it got close to expiring, it wasn't guaranteed to continue. LEGO had to renegotiate, and they did, at first extending it to 2011, then 2016, then 2022. The license is now locked in through 2032, but for a while, LEGO Star Wars was scheduled to be a limited theme that would just stop. If the negotiations had fallen through in 2008, it would have just ended. But while the theme was still running in the mid-2000s, LEGO tried something that seems impossible now. In 2005, they made 5 special minifigures with built-in electronics: Anakin, Obi-Wan, Mace Windu, Luminara Unduli, and Darth Vader. You'd press their head down and the lightsaber they were holding would actually glow, but the trade-off was pretty brutal. The battery only lasted 3 hours in total, and the figures couldn't be disassembled at all, so the feature was quietly dropped after just 1 year. These minifigures were in a few different sets, and then LEGO never tried it again. But speaking of lightsabers, the hilts actually used to look way better. From 1999 to around 2005, every lightsaber hilt in LEGO Star Wars was shiny chrome silver, just like they are in the movies. But in 2005, they switched over to a medium stone gray for a few years, before eventually using a bunch of different types of colors. Today's sets mostly use a dull dark silver. The chrome version still shows up occasionally, but it's rare now. And the early chrome hilts are pretty valuable because of how much better they look. But the hilts aren't the only part of lightsabers that changed. From 1999 to 2011, every green lightsaber blade was transparent fluorescent green, which is a bright, slightly yellowish neon color. But in 2011, LEGO switched to transparent bright green, which is slightly darker and more saturated. And after that, they never went back. If you have lightsabers in both colors side by side, the difference is actually pretty noticeable. But most people who grew up with LEGO Star Wars have no idea this even happened because it was never announced anywhere. And speaking of quiet changes, Darth Vader's helmet actually got completely redesigned in 2015. From 1999 to 2014, Vader's helmet didn't change at all. Then in the Death Star Final Duel set, LEGO changed it to a two-piece design with a separate neck piece and helmet that's way more accurate to the movies. Most people who grew up with the old helmet didn't even notice when it changed. But the funny part is that the 2019 20th anniversary sets brought back the original helmet, which was the first time LEGO admitted that the change had even happened. But now, let me show you something that's really easy to miss if you don't own both versions of it. The original Phase 1 Clone Trooper helmets from 2002 to 2007 had a cutout slit for the visor. There was a literal hole in the plastic, which meant you could see the black printed head underneath through the gap. In 2008, when the Clone Wars TV show sub-theme launched, LEGO redesigned the helmet, so the visor was fully printed on the piece with a proper face visible underneath it. This also made the clones feel more like actual people, since, you know, that's what they were. But the clones actually changed again in 2022, and it was surprisingly really meaningful. For most of LEGO Star Wars history, clone troopers had generic light-colored heads inside their helmets. But in 2020, with the 501st Legion Clone Troopers set, LEGO introduced a new head print with Maori and Polynesian-accurate skin tone to match actors Temuera Morrison and Daniel Logan, who played Jango and young Boba Fett. This was a really subtle but awesome change that most people just didn't catch when it happened. And that wasn't the only skin tone change either. For most of LEGO Star Wars history, realistic skin tone meant one color: light nougat, which was introduced in 2004. By 2020, it was still being used for 78% of all Star Wars skin tones. But in 2022, LEGO started using medium brown and medium tan across all licensed themes. Collectors only noticed when new figures started showing up with different looking skin. But now, let me talk about a feature that took forever to come to Star Wars: dual molded legs. The first Star Wars minifigure to get them was Han Solo in the Betrayal at Cloud City set in 2018, which is a really long time after LEGO Star Wars started, but LEGO designers actually had an explanation for it. Apparently, LEGO Star Wars minifigures in particular use a bunch of different types of plastic, so making dual molds for them is a lot more difficult than it is for other themes. They've slowly been rolling out to more characters since 2018, but there still aren't that many of them. But if you think this is bad, arm printing has existed in Star Wars for over 20 years and still isn't standard. The first Star Wars minifigure with printed arms was Boba Fett in the Cloud City set from 2003, and he's also the first minifigure with leg printing. That was over 20 years ago, but today, arm printing is still a premium feature that LEGO only adds where it really makes sense. In 2021, LEGO designers publicly confirmed this won't ever be universal because some printing machines physically can't do it, and they can't replace all of them at once. But in 2019, to mark 20 years of LEGO Star Wars, LEGO released 5 special sets, and they all came with a throwback minifigure with old school yellow skin. Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Darth Vader with the original 1999 helmet, Princess Leia, and Lando Calrissian. These figures even used the original torso designs too, which is a really cool detail. It was the first time yellow-skinned Star Wars minifigures had shown up since 1999. But speaking of 1999, that's when the UCS theme started, and it was a lot different than it is now. The original UCS sets, like the TIE Interceptor and the X-Wing, had 0 minifigures. LEGO originally wanted UCS sets to be display models for adults, but they slowly realized that people didn't like this. By 2007, with the Ultimate Collector's Millennium Falcon, LEGO started including minifigures in UCS sets, and I think we can all agree that that was a really good decision. But that original UCS X-Wing has a weirdly funny secret. When designers needed a clear window for the cockpit, instead of making something new, they just repurposed the windscreen cover from a 4.5 volt battery box designed for LEGO train sets. It was basically a perfect fit. These days, we know that they did this to save money, since they didn't know how well the UCS theme would really do. But UCS wasn't the only alternate format LEGO tried. In 2009, they released the Midi-scale Millennium Falcon, which was kind of stuck in the middle. It was a display set that was too small for minifigures, but too detailed to be a toy. It didn't do too well though, because after a Star Destroyer in 2010, there was nothing for over a decade. The format just vanished. But for the 25th anniversary in 2024, LEGO brought it back with 3 new Midi-scale ships, the Millennium Falcon, the Tantive IV, and the Invisible Hand. LEGO abandoned this format for 14 years and then just decided to start making them again, like nothing happened. But this next format was so weird that it never came back. In 2002, LEGO released a TIE Fighter set in the mini sub theme, and it only had 12 pieces. It came in a poly bag, cost almost nothing, and was originally a promo for the LEGO Club. LEGO officially confirmed it as the smallest Star Wars set ever made, but there was also a hidden trick. If you bought 4 specific sets in the mini sub theme, the extra parts from all 4 of them could be built into a mini TIE bomber that didn't appear in any instructions. But if you thought that format was weird, in 2007, LEGO released a motorized version of the AT-AT. This thing actually walked forward and backward because it came with a motor, and it also had a head that moved up and down. It was LEGO's most expensive Star Wars set that year, besides the UCS Millennium Falcon. But here's the catch. It was only available directly from LEGO's catalog and website, not in regular stores. It became so popular that it went on permanent back order after Christmas in 2009, and those sets wouldn't ship out until June of 2010. It retired in 2010, and now sells for around $500 sealed, and LEGO's never made another motorized AT-AT since then. And speaking of things LEGO only tried once, in 2000 they launched a full sub-theme of large-scale Star Wars Technic sets. There was a pit droid, a battle droid, and a destroyer droid in the first wave. Then it kept going in 2001 with C-3PO and a stormtrooper. And then it ended in 2002 with Darth Vader, R2-D2, Jango Fett, and a super battle droid. After this, they never made another set for this sub-theme. The format just vanished. It was eventually replaced by the Buildable Figures construction sub-theme in 2015, which also flopped and got canceled. So LEGO has tried twice to make large buildable Star Wars figures, and both times it didn't work. But now, let me tell you about something that's oddly specific. When LEGO released Kit Fisto in set 7661 back in 2007, his head tentacles couldn't be made out of plastic because they'd snap off. So LEGO had to improvise, and they decided to make him a rubber head instead. He was the first LEGO Star Wars minifigure with a non-plastic head, and only 2 others ever got the same treatment: Plo Koon and the Clone Wars animated version of Yoda. All 3 of them are from a short experimental window between 2007 and 2012, where LEGO was trying this out. But after 2012, they just stopped doing it. But the weirdest minifigure story in all of LEGO Star Wars is Jedi Bob's. In 2002, the Republic gunship set included an unnamed generic Jedi, who didn't match any character from the movies. And for some reason, fans started calling him Jedi Bob. He appeared in exactly 1 set, and was never seen again for 22 years. That name wasn't even officially acknowledged until the 2009 LEGO Star Wars Visual Dictionary, 7 years after the set had been released. But then, in 2024, LEGO finally brought him back and gave him his own starfighter, and he became the lead character of the Disney Plus series, LEGO Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy. Even the voice actor, Bobby Moynihan, turned out to own a Jedi Bob figure before he was cast for the part. This is a big milestone for Jedi Bob. And speaking of milestone minifigures, in 2019, LEGO Star Wars passed 1,000 unique minifigures in total. The 1,000th minifig was Iden Versio, the protagonist of the Star Wars Battlefront 2 video game. She's a character most casual Star Wars fans wouldn't even recognize, and she's only ever been in the Inferno Squad Battle Pack set. The milestone was officially hit in 2019, which means Star Wars went from 0 to 1,000 unique minifigures in exactly 20 years. But the coolest Star Wars minifigure isn't Iden Versio. It's someone way more important. In 2009, LEGO's design team in Billund made a minifigure of George Lucas himself, and it was never sold anywhere publicly, and it wasn't even announced. Because of this, nobody has any idea how many of them were made, or what they're worth. However, one did sell at auction on a website called Prop Store, and it was sold from anywhere from $8,000 to $16,000. But Bricklink has no sales data because so few of them have sold. It's essentially the rarest non-chrome Star Wars minifigure ever made, and almost nobody has one. But which update in this video surprised you the most? Be sure to let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.